This is how to control the narrative and therefore change behavior. As you're watching this, be aware that I am going to be going deeper than some of my other videos, even to the point of breaking down the location and science of what individual parts of the brain are responsible for doing. So if you're a note taker, please pause this video, go grab your equipment. Most people lose or gain influence before the conversation even starts. So whoever defines the situation first controls how it is understood, except for the very rare person who knows how to regain control from somebody else. If you don't control the narrative, somebody else will, and you'll be reacting instead of leading. This video is for those who want to lead conversations. The way that I would define controlling the narrative, or CTN, is by shaping how a situation is interpreted before decisions are made. That's key. It has to be before. Now, the person who defines the meaning of the situation influences the direction of behavior for everybody else involved. Why does this work when we talk about it from a psychological perspective? Well, the brain looks at context first and then makes decisions inside of that context. Once the narrative is accepted, the brain tends to favor information that supports that narrative. When that narrative changes, so does the emotional response, which is what dictates behavior. Therefore, by changing the context, we can change the behavior. Now, this is a core principle. The first frame wins. The first clear interpretation often becomes the default perspective. And once something's been accepted as the default, or the general population is seeing it in this context, it's very hard to shift it from that. It takes a lot of intentionality and skill on somebody's part. It doesn't happen just randomly. Now, if you want to be the person that can more easily become the leader in controlling the narrative, there are certain signals that people look for when they're deciding who to follow. So authority is perceived through clarity, calm delivery, and consistency. Never force it, or else it is quickly and easily lost. Chase Hughes, who is one of my favorite behavioral specialists, talks so much about how to do this. He says to move slowly, to speak slowly, and to appear the most comfortable. Not dominant, just comfortable. If you present a simple, confident interpretation, people are more likely to consider it. So if I'm a personal trainer trying to get you as a client and we're in a consultation, a weak approach to this would be kind of displaying the plan that I think would work best for them, and then asking them, do you think this might help? It's not leading them, it's not controlling them. Whereas if you control the narrative with this wording, from my experience, this is what will help you most right now. That leads them right to it. It says, from my experience, it makes you an authority in this. This is what will help you right now. The step-by-step way that I would go about by controlling the narrative and the whole framework, if you have the most amount of time and you can start from scratch, this is the way that I would plan it. This can go into your consultations, this can go into your questionnaires, this can go into everything. Define what the conversation is about early on. Talk about, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. This is how it's going to benefit you. And if you're talking about structuring something, a good example for this would be, this is less about motivation and more about having the right structure or the right system in place to help you. That way they're thinking about it from that perspective, and it's not just going into the gym and working out. The second step is to label their current narrative. It seems like you feel stuck because nothing has worked consistently. If you haven't already, go back after this video and watch my video on labeling. This is essential in my opinion. Now, the reason why labeling can help so much in helping you control the narrative is because people will submit their decision to you if they feel as though you fully understand how they feel and that you have their best interest at heart. Labeling removes those barriers, helps them feel like you do see them and do understand what they're trying to communicate. The next step is to reinforce with certainty. Deliver the new narrative calmly and clearly. Never over-explain. Try to avoid that intentionally. And then this last step, you can do what's called future pacing. And I'll probably release a video on this at some point, but I've kind of hinted at it in multiple of my videos already. So an example of this is, once this is structured correctly, your goals become more predictable and easier to hit than ever. Let's talk about this in a personal training context. In this first example, it's going to be somebody that does not believe that they have enough time. So what we're going to do, as I said in the definition for controlling the narrative, we have to get there before they can say, I'm too busy, or I don't have enough time. I don't think my schedule will allow it. So instead of them saying any of those objections, when you are going through your questions and you're asking them things and you're talking to them and instructing them, before you even get to the point of asking them for the sale, which is where they would say that objection, you would say something to the effect of, you don't need more time, you need more efficiency. Efficiency is one of the best words for overachievers, and overachievers are the people who pack their days full the most. So this is directed for those people. The second example is somebody who just doesn't have the motivation. They might be streaky. They might go to the gym for a couple of months or weeks and they fall off. And that's been their pattern for a long time. They are going to say something like, I lack motivation. They don't see the point in buying a trainer when that's just going to be money that they think will be lost over a couple of weeks or months when they would normally fall off. So instead of them saying that early on in the conversation, you are going to say, motivation isn't the issue. Your system hasn't been built to work long term. This third example, the last one I'm going to give, is somebody who thinks that this is going to be too hard. It's just going to be a lot of work in every direction, a lot of mental capacity. So their initial baseline when they come to your meeting is going to be, this is overwhelming. So you have to front that, and you're going to be saying, this is the level of effort that creates change. And then you would build out the belief behind that. And that's going to be through conversation, through questions, through stories, what you've done with clients in their situation where they have the same goals as one of the clients that you helped. Now let's talk about what the parts of the brain are doing in this situation. So this is going to be the first video that I get a little bit more into the neuroscience behind it. The amygdala is in charge of threat detection. It's located far inside the medial temporal lobes, anterior to the hippocampus. It's part of the brain that processes emotion. And it's not responsible for all emotion, but it processes it. It's part of your awareness. So the brain consistently scans for threats. When it senses pressure or judgment, it creates resistance. And that could be in the form of throwing up walls, or that could be in the form of backing up. If someone feels challenged or corrected, their brain shifts into a defensive state. So that labeling technique is really important. The way that I would approach this is using a calm tone, labeling, and agreement to reduce perceived threat before introducing a new idea. The limbic system is responsible for emotional meaning. So a series of brain structures that can be found lateral to the thalamus, beneath the cerebral cortex, and just above the brainstem. These brain structures do many things for us, but we will be focusing on the regulation of emotion in this context. The emotion drives decisions faster than logic does. So the meaning someone assigns to a situation creates their emotional response. This is how I would work with it. You want to change the interpretation of the situation to shift the emotional reaction. Once you've kind of shifted the emotional reaction, then they can think more clearly, and that will be part of the prefrontal cortex. This part handles reasoning, planning, and evaluating options. This is the decision and logic part of your brain. It works best with the person when they feel safe, and this is key, not overwhelmed. This doesn't mean that you have overwhelmed them, but they are not overwhelmed. If they come in overwhelmed, you're going to do a little bit of extra work to help them focus on being in the moment and just on what you guys are talking about, not worried about all the other things they have on their to-do list for the day. The way that I would work with this is keeping explanations simple and structured so the brain can follow easily. I'll talk more on that part later on. There's going to be another section that will address this more effectively. So we have oftentimes cognitive patterning. So it's our brain is looking for something that we can understand, and the brain prefers to stay consistent with what it already believes. Once a narrative is accepted, it resists conflicting information. So a good example of this is somebody that, you have a good friend and they have somebody that they're dating or whatever else, and they just cannot see the faults in this person, no matter how big they are. But everybody else can see it. It's because they first met this person and they were really sweet at a bar or whatever location they were at when they met. So their brain, by default, is seeing that person in that first initial narrative because that was their first frame. So the way that I work with something like this is I introduce a new narrative early and reinforce it clearly. So again, getting to that first frame. Now the cognitive load or the mental effort that it takes for this type of conversation, for shifting the narrative and controlling the narrative, well, the brain avoids complex or confusing information. When it's something easy to understand, it's more likely to be accepted. But now to break out a little bit more on what we were talking about earlier, keep the frame simple. People follow and agree with the person that is the easiest to follow, not the one with the best plan. We will always choose understanding over gambling, confusion, and success. Because if we can't understand it, we don't feel in control, and human beings like to be in control. So in order to work with this, what I do is I keep my framing simple, clear, and direct. Now, a lot of times people will pull back from these situations, and these are going to be like resistance patterns. So the brain increases resistance when it feels one or more of these three things. If the brain feels controlled, judged, or confused, because we like to be in control, we like to feel understood, and we like to know what's going on. So in order to reduce resistance, we need to validate first, introduce ideas gradually, and let them feel involved in the conclusion. Chase Hughes, that behavioral specialist that I like, would often say to lead them to the point where they found the solution. And that solution was really your plan all along. I talk more about how to do this in my video, Make Them Want to Listen to You. I'll hyperlink it in the description down below. So the big summary, lowering the threat increases openness. Once they are more open, you can present a new, simple meaning, which will increase their acceptance. So if they're open to it, they will then look for the next thing that makes sense, which is your solution, your meaning, and then they will accept that more readily. Leading them to say the next steps is going to be one of the most powerful ways of getting them to do this, because they're not being told what to do. You're leading them along, you're guiding them so that they figure it out for themselves, which increases the follow-through. Common mistakes here is talking too much. Their internal narrative will reinforce what you're saying as well. Give mental room and space for that voice to speak to them. And I mean in conversation. Don't pitch your sale and then give them a couple days to think about it, because their chance of saying yes is highest when you are talking to them in that moment. If they walk away and you guys set up a phone call for later, the chances of that working is much lower. So sounding unsure is another thing that you want to avoid. I'll have a video on how to use your voice as a tool and a weapon for confidence and leadership. Now, this is something that you want to use to build other people up, not control them and strong-arm them. Another thing you want to reduce is trying to win instead of guide. It's you plus them, not you versus them. The last thing you want to reduce is ignoring their current perspective. I talk a lot about this in my labeling video. Now, call to action, something that I will charge you with as the watcher of this video. Start noticing where you are reacting instead of leading. One of the things that I like to do is asking myself the question, what narrative is controlling this right now? And then introduce a better one. Introduce it to yourself, use the same video, go back through, write out the action steps, write out all of the information, and then just journal something to yourself. Talk to yourself as if you are you, but 20 years older or 40 years older. And so you have all of this experience that this current you doesn't have. But now we're looking at it in the context of what's long-term, what's best for you. And oftentimes just separating yourself into like those two different perspectives, those two different identities almost. That way you're not caught up in all the confusing parts of life that you're in right now. Check the description down below. I'm going to hyperlink all the videos that I referenced here in this conversation. Also check out Chase Hughes. He is a superb behavior specialist. I hope this helps. If you liked me going a little bit more into depth about what individual parts of the brain do for us in these instances, let me know. I hope this gives you more control over your personal life and therefore your job and your relationships. Thanks for watching.